The software giant Microsoft has now accused China of hacking the accounts of 25 organizations, including US government emails. However, China has denied these accusations and called US, quote-unquote, the world's biggest global cyber thief. Microsoft has said that the China-based hacking group, which it refers to as Storm 0558, had accessed email accounts by forging digital authentication tokens required by the system. The tokens are typically used to verify a person's identity. However, the software giant has not provided details of where the government agencies are based. Now, according to reports, Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo was among the individuals impacted by this breach. The US department took immediate action and began monitoring their systems on Microsoft notification. Now, what should be noted is that US media has reported that the State Department had also been targeted by the hackers. On the other hand, Chinese embassy has said that the accusation was disinformation and called the US government the world's biggest hacking empire and global cyber thief. The software giant said its investigations found that the breaches began in the middle of May and that it has now mitigated this attack and has contacted impacted customers. The report added that they added substantial automated detections for known indicators of compromise associated with this attack and that they have found no evidence of further access. Remember, in May, Microsoft and Western spy agencies had said that Chinese hackers had used stealthy malware to attack critical infrastructure on American military bases in Guam as well. Let's try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of what this could mean as far as US security is concerned. And for that, let me bring in my guest today. I'm joined in by Andy Kaiser, who's a senior fellow at the National Security Institute. Thank you, Andy, for joining in. Now, when we look at various US government agencies, there are reports of the US State Department also being targeted, not to forget the US Commerce Department as well. When you look at such critical departments being targeted, what do you make of a cyber espionage campaign of this extent?
Yeah, nice to be on with you. I differentiate these in two buckets. So for those of us who pay attention to these issues day in and day out. Right. This is just another day at the office for the Chinese People's Liberation Army in their hacking empire that wakes up every day trying to figure out how to break into key systems and networks, particularly the United States, their chief adversary, of course, but not just the United States, of course. They're voracious in their appetite for data, information, intelligence, including against our Indian allies. Right. So the actual threat is not surprising. The conduct is not surprising, but it does raise public awareness. And I do think there is some, I think that is very helpful as policymakers look to make the case, both domestically and internationally, that the Chinese are aggressive, that they continue these attacks largely unabated. And as you mentioned, two of them were right ahead of key diplomatic meetings, clearly going for an edge in those meetings. So that's how I'm seeing the two areas of attack.
And when we talk of such hacking campaigns by China, is it possible to identify the impact of these hacking campaigns?
Well, thus far, it seems to be fairly limited to non-classified systems, which is sort of the lower lying through. I mean, this was an attack through Microsoft, a supply chain attack, which is how the last handful of key cyber attacks from the Chinese and the Russians have been conducted against more of a software supply chain attack. But the Microsoft attack is significant because obviously Microsoft's products are ubiquitous globally, including in our key U.S. government departments and agencies. Though, again, this was unclassified systems, more looking for emails, communication, other things, again, to give the Chinese an advantage ahead of these key meetings, including, as you mentioned, reportedly the Commerce Secretary's personal emails ahead of key meetings in China, and then Secretary Blinken and his key team ahead of their meetings when he flew to Beijing as well.
So going by what Microsoft had to say, if we were to refer to what they said in March. They said that stealthy malware to attack critical infrastructure on American military bases in Guam was used. Let's not forget, as you also mentioned, US allies like India. India too has detected similar attacks on its government agencies. How is China's threat of cyber espionage growing in the last couple of years? And where are government agencies lagging when it comes to India or even a technologically advanced nation like the United States?
Yeah, well, again, some of these attacks are very sophisticated levels. You have key Chinese military and intelligence officials wake up every morning and figure out how to break into these systems and networks, and they're aggressive. And this is what they do for a living, and they've gotten increasingly good at it. How broad are these efforts? I think it's probably rare to find a country that hasn't been targeted. It's rare to find a company that has any intellectual property that hasn't been targeted, often by those same entities, sometimes in evening hours, moonlighting, as we say, and then they receive that intellectual property and hand it off to a Chinese state-owned champion to compete illegally in the marketplace against those companies. So we see a very broad, very sophisticated effort that is, it's hard to stop every single attack. And so, as we know and we've seen, all it takes is for one key penetration and they can access key systems and networks. Most of these have been, again, in the unclassified realm. Obviously, a handful of years ago, we had a very significant attack where the Chinese were able to get to access key security clearance information, including mine, from a hack against our Office of Management and Personnel here in the U.S. That was very significant. But other than that, we are seeing these more low-level attacks against public networks in the government.
All right. So as someone who's personally borne the brunt of such attacks, let's also talk about how this is now being raised at diplomatic levels as well. CNN has learned from State Department sources that the hack was raised during Blinken's meeting with the Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi in Jakarta as well. With already a long list of issues on which the US and China cannot see eye to eye, will China's apparent threat of cyber espionage deflect the ongoing efforts of a thaw? And how much focus should the United States also be, how much weightage should the US in fact be adding to this threat of cyber espionage coming from Beijing?
Yeah, I do worry about this. I think the last three American presidents, have raised this issue directly with their Chinese counterparts, only to get very tepid agreements or commitments. We promise to not hack anymore. Thank you. Go away. And that, of course, is not worth the paper it's written on when it is written on paper, or if it's a verbal or handshake agreement. So I do think we need more teeth to some kind of agreement. I think these are very serious issues. We probably, I'm sure we are, but we ought to delineate between the conduct that every nation takes, which is collecting intelligence for their own purposes, and then this corporate espionage that goes beyond the pale of what Western democracies certainly are willing to do. And it undermines our economy, it undermines our jobs, it undermines our global partners, including in India. And so I think we do need to be careful. Yeah, you shouldn't go after our key government officials, though that's to be expected, and we should probably do a better job protecting our systems and networks. And I know we're doing a good job of our own offensive cyber, or I suspect that we are. So those two efforts, I think, can make a difference. But I'm worried we're not raising it at the high enough level, and it's sort of an afterthought to other key considerations, whether it's trade or understandably important issues like the security across the Taiwan Strait.
We do hope that the United States comes up with a course of action when it comes to such threats. And so does India, because India has also been targeted very actively in the last 2 years. Thank you so much, Andy, for joining in with those precious and detailed insights on this topic.